So, good morning, and here I am in the classroom Monday morning. I kind of feel that this is epic. This is the first time in my 31 years of education that we've had to teach remotely because of outlined circumstances. So, I've provided remote learning for students who have gone on trips and things like that, but this is the first time that it's class-wide. And it's kind of unusual and it's different. So one of the things I know my students and I enjoy together is our read aloud, and I want to maintain it. So for my N4 friends, I'm going to continue with reading out loud of the Mysterious Benedict Society and keep it recorded. Hopefully post on Flipgrid, and hopefully that you can still see it and watch it if you want to. It's not anything mandatory, but it's a way for us to still connect and still enjoy literature together and be able to share our stories with each other. So we left off with Rainey asking Mr. Benedict before he's leaving his office about, have you read? I'm like, let me read again. Mr. Benedict, sir, have you read all the books in this house? And Mr. Benedict's response is, my dear boy. He said, what do you think? Bright and early, Mr. Benedict had said, and indeed it was early, but it was far from bright. As the children rose and went down to the dining room, not knowing where else to meet, rain was slashing against the windows, wind groaned in the chimneys, and odd drafts sent papers flying from desktops and skittering across the floors. The blackened sky outside seemed to creep gloomily into the house, dimming the lamps and lengthening their shadows, and along with the howling chimneys was heard the growling of thunder, low and menacing and close at hand, as if a tiger prowled the dark rooms beyond their walls. From time to time the lamps flickered with the thunder, and once, just as the children were taking their seats at the table, they went out completely. They went out entirely. The room was dark only for a few moments, yet when the lamps came back to life, Milligan stood before the children with a pitcher of juice having appeared out of nowhere. Constance shrieked. The other children jumped. Milligan sighed. Filling their juice glasses, he said, Rhonda's coming with toast and eggs. Number 2's stopping a leak in her bedroom wall. She'll fetch Mr. Benedict when she's done. Milligan, may I have some milk, please? Kate asked cheerily. She'd been awake longer than anyone, and already bathed and dressed in the fresh clothes Rhonda had given her, and apparently, unaffected by the storm, was in a much better mood than the others. Without doubt, she was in a better mood than Milligan, who nodded glumly and said, anything else? You wouldn't have any tea, would you, Milligan? Asked Rainey, and perhaps a little honey. And candy? Asked Constance. No candy for breakfast, Milligan said, leaving the room. Rhonda appeared with a tray of wheat toast, eggs, and fruit. Good morning, everyone, she said. Quite a bit of weather we're having, isn't it? On a day like this, you have to set something on every stray sheet of paper if you don't want a draft carrying it off. A map of Stonetown Harbor passed me in the hall just now, and on the stairs I found a grocery list I misplaced 2 weeks ago. Leaks in the wall and drafts in every room, Constance grumbled. You should have these things fixed. Leaks and drafts aren't priorities, I'm afraid, Rhonda said. Our project, which is now your project, too, has required every spare moment, and all our resources have gone toward the research, the investigation, and the tests. Constance, will you pass the juice pitcher, please? No, the girl replied, crossing her arms. Perhaps you'll be less cranky after you've eaten, Rhonda said, getting the pitcher herself. At this, Constance's pudgy, rosy cheeks grew redder still, so that her wispy blonde hair seemed almost white in contrast, and her pale blue eyes shone bright as stars. Rhonda noticed this and said, Constance, I had no idea how lovely your eyes were until just now. They're spectacular. This compliment, somehow upsetting to Constance, kept her quiet for some time. Milligan returned with the milk, a pot of tea, and a jar of honey. Mumbling something to Rhonda about being on duty, he left without another word. What does he mean by that? Sticky said. On duty. Milligan is our, for lack of a better word, our bodyguard. He has other tasks, but his first duty is to make sure we're safe. Of course, until now, we haven't been in any direct danger. But now that you're here, I'm sorry. I don't mean to alarm you. The important thing is that he's here to protect you. Protect us from what? Rainey asked. I'll let Mr. Benedict explain all that to you when he comes down. The main rule is this. You must never leave the house without Milligan's company. Inside the house, you're quite safe. We have defenses here. The maze, for example, wasn't just a test. It's the only entrance. And this reminds me, all the arrows in the maze point to the stairway, which isn't helpful if you're trying to leave the house. That's another reason you should never go without Milligan. We have a special way of opening the front door. You'll remember that it has no inside knob, and Milligan knows the maze like the back of his hand. I've always thought that a funny expression, Kate said, because how well do people really know the backs of their hands? Honestly, can anyone here tell me exactly what the back of your hand looks like? They were all contemplating the backs of their hand when Mr. Benedict came in. Followed very closely and attentively by number 2, who no longer wore her yellow suit, but had changed into a comfortable pair of yellow coveralls, so that she still looked every bit the pencil. She stuck close to Mr. Benedict until he had greeted everyone and taken his chair, after which she swooped upon the platter of toast and eggs, accidentally jostling Rhonda in the process. "Pardon me," she said, embarrassed. "Not at all," said Rhonda to the children, she said. "Number 2 is always hungry because she never sleeps. A person needs a great deal of energy to stay awake all the time, and thus a great deal of food." "It also makes me somewhat nervous and irritable, I'm afraid," said number 2. She proceeded to eat the crusts off her toast by turning it around and around and taking tiny, rapid bites. "You never sleep?" Kate asked after watching this curious procedure for a moment. Number 2 swallowed. "Oh, yes, I do, but only a little." "Don't we make a fine pair?" said Mr. Benedict, pouring himself a cup of tea. "I can't stay awake, and number 2 can't go to sleep." He started to laugh, then cut himself short, apparently not wanting to risk it. "By the way, Rhonda, have you seen my map of the harbor? It appears to have escaped the study." "It drifted by me in the hallway," Rhonda said. "I placed it by the bell under the Swiss book on electron-positron accelerators." "Thank you. Now, children, speaking of the bell, do you all remember where it is? On the second-floor landing. If you ever hear that bell ringing, I want you to gather on the landing immediately. It will only be rung in case of emergency, so don't delay. Drop what you're doing and go there at once. Understood?" The children nodded uneasily. All this talk of danger and emergencies without explanation was beginning to wear on them. "I'm sorry to put you ill at ease," Mr. Benedict said, "and I haven't much to say to comfort you. I can finally offer some answers to your questions, however. Who wishes to begin? Yes, Constance." To the great exasperation of the others, Constance demanded to know why they couldn't have candy for breakfast. Mr. Benedict smiled. "A fine question. The short answer is that there is no candy presently in the house. Beyond that, the explanation involves a consideration of candy's excellent flavor, but low nutritional value. That is to say, why it makes a wonderful treat, but a poor meal, though I suspect you aren't interested in explanations, but simply wish to express your frustration. Is that correct?" "Maybe," Constance said with a shrug, but she seemed satisfied. "Other questions?" said Mr. Benedict. There were, of course, other questions,